live and we're going to get started here, just setting it up. And I'm just give you a little introduction before we get into it here. Just setting it up. There we go. All right, so Kira Grunenberg, welcome to Hannah's Corner. For those of you tuning in tonight, Kira is the founder of Throw the Dice and Play Nice, her writing blog, and has also written for other publications such as American Songwriter and DownBeat Magazine. And she's a passionate writer, arts advocate, and we are very pleased to have her on Hannah's Corner. So thank you so much, Kira, for being here tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be part of, another really passionate artist's kind of grassroots endeavor. And, you certainly engage with a wide variety of artistic and creative people. So I'm glad to be counted as one of them.
Yes, definitely. I owe it to actually Mackenzie, who connected us. I think she was kind of looking for journalists, and especially with jazz and crossover music in particular, since I kind of identify as a crossover genre blending artist. I think you really understand that, because as I was going through some of your writing, you're kind of breaking barriers. You don't I can't say you only write for country artists or cover jazz artists. You cover quite a range of artists. And
Well, I mean, part of that comes from, whenever anybody asks me to write a little mini bio or just kind of sum up what I'm about musically, it's kind of everything. And it sounds a little cliche because, when people ask you, oh, what's your favorite type of music? And, you get that cliche response of, oh, I listen to everything except country, rap, or opera or something like that. I'm the person that tends to say, I mean it when I do listen to that stuff. And I guess if I had to come up with an individual tagline, it's kind of I think every song deserves to be heard at least one time, because, you really don't know. It's like judging a book by its cover. You got to listen to something from front to back before you can have an opinion on it. So I just think everybody deserves that chance.
Yes, I would agree. So can you maybe tell me a little bit about your background, how you got into writing, and how you discovered your passion for music journalism in particular?
I've always had a passion for music, probably ever since I was given an instrument to, put in my hands when I was 7 or 8 years old. But as far as, writing and what have you, really what kind of started it was I went to graduate school for performing arts administration, and I was kind of looking to do more of the behind the scenes kind of heavy lifting stuff for artists. But in the immediate aftermath of graduating, I kind of had this void there was a lot of very dynamic conversations between myself and my classmates and our teachers about all these current events and very diverse topics in the arts world. And I sort of felt like I was missing that. And then one day a friend of mine says, oh, you should start a blog and just write about stuff that you find on the internet. And that way, and it sort of helped curb that void. And so I started doing it. And at first it was just to kind of scratch an itch of feeling deprived from having no lectures. And then it sort of evolved from there. And I sort of learned as I went along and, met more and more people over the years and more styles of music. And here we are.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the pieces that you recently covered, I think this was back in January, but still this year, and how I discovered you was I read your piece on Candace Springs that you actually looks like you got a chance to interview her. She's one of my all-time favorite artists right now. So I was just so psyched that you interviewed her, and I love the questions you asked about one of them I think was how do you in your album The Women Who Raised Me, is that a personal story or is that more something for your fans? And it was kind of about the vision and as far as her jazz journey, what she wanted to put out there. And I think you really asked some poignant questions.
Oh, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And that's it's so cool to know that, it's always exciting for me when I interview artists, just to have that privilege and that opportunity, but to know that somebody says, oh, they're my favorite, or I love this album, or, so I'm glad that was exciting for you. Yeah. Certainly the album itself was super, personal and, very, very, very strongly written and lyrically, extremely powerful. I don't know if you've had a chance to go from front to back again anytime recently, but it's not casual listening. I don't think. I think it's something that you sit with. And so when I went in to speak with her about it, I was just like, okay, I got to go in with questions that go beyond the typical fluff and the typical expected cliches. And I really want to know what made her tick and what the real deep down things that maybe she doesn't get a typical chance to talk about in terms of inspiration and motivation. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and it's cool that you found it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, because you were an active contributor to DownBeat Magazine, so I think I found her on DownBeat um, in that latest piece you did on her album. So yeah, no, it's wonderful. How is she as a person? I haven't met her, but how did you find her to be as a
Oh,
human?
she was so fun to talk to. She was easygoing and peppy, and just like you talk to her for 2 minutes and you just feel like I know her. I mean, in the you feel like you can kind of let down some of that overly clinical air that I think can come across when two people don't know each other and you have those nerves, and that she just washed the nerves away. She's just like, you know what, we're going to talk about music, and you seem like you're into it, so let's just have fun with it. And it just made it that much more of a good experience, I think.
Oh, awesome. Did you reach out to her initially, or was it something like someone wanted you to go reach out to her? How did that work?
It's a little bit of both. There are certain albums that I think come up in the jazz scene with Downbeat that kind of either it kind of depends on if it's me or my editor, or sometimes we have this kind of synchronicity about ourselves where we go, oh, we should look into X artist that has a thing coming up, or just announced this thing, and either one or both of us will say, so we're gonna do this, right? And and then we'll go for it. So I think it was a little bit of both, just kind of who pulls the trigger on saying like let's do it
Right.
vary. But
Yeah, that's kind of an exciting process because you're in a way you're at the forefront of what's hip, what is out there right now, what are the cool things people are doing. So maybe you could talk a little bit to like, I know Candace is kind of under that genre busting category, right? Because she's like pop, soul, but also jazz. What other artists are kind of on her wavelength right now that you're really digging in the scene?
in terms of just, I mean, anybody, jazz or non-jazz, because you said I cover so many different, I mean, I guess I'll give you a variety, but there was a band about 2.5 years ago. I found, out of all places, one of my favorite places to go look for, like what's new or what kind of strikes me is Bandcamp. And I was just looking through the new arrivals, and I hit a genre, and this kind of name of this one album stuck out at me, and I clicked through, and the color of the cover art, and it was this band called City Mouth. And I was like, that's such an interesting name. And then I hit the play button, and at first I thought, oh, this is very square on the nose pop punk. And you kind of know what to expect in terms of, the storied stylistic markers for that genre. And at first I was like, okay, yeah, this is pretty much what I expect. And then the lyrics are just full on, the front vocalist just talking about Jesus and religion and like spiritual ambivalence. And I'm thinking, that's not your stereotypical pop punk lyrical content. And so I just kept digging, and from there I kind of developed this relationship of just listening to their music. And since that one release with all that very kind of out of left field lyrical stuff, they have evolved sonically too, and they just put out a full length that I actually reviewed for American Songwriter, and it was a far cry and away from that first song that I found. So it was kind of interesting to watch that evolution from them, like on their own. But then on top of that, it was just really well put together. And they're one of those bands that's kind of, really out there, but still having to do that, like very DIY grassroots hustle with their local community, and they're, signed to a label, but they've still got that tight knit, like one-to-one relationship with their fans. And so that's just, for me, that's been a fun journey to watch in terms of like covering that album, not just as here, these are, these 12 tracks, but the whole journey leading up to it. Beyond that, this is a little farther back, but earlier this year, way before all this craziness, let's see, I wrote about a singer-songwriter uh, who goes by the stage name Charlie Mountain. And they are a, let me see if I can do this in one breath, country outlaw um, singer songwriter from, oh gosh, I can't remember the state, but who run their own label and identify as non-binary. And I decided, like, I heard the music. It was this one single that actually got sent to me. Um, and it struck me as kind of a little bit like Bright Eyes. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're familiar, but just very like vocally very emotional, and just really kind of strikes you when you hear the voice. And the song itself was about this very personal matter with regard to parts of transitioning and and matters such as that. And so it just really struck me as like a very important story contained within one song that needed to be told. And I just took it upon myself to like put that out there, and I wanted to be as respectful and amplifying as possible. And you know, it meant a lot to them. So, and it meant a lot to me to have been that sort of extra arm to just be that extra support, you know. And those are the kinds of things that stand out to me in terms of whether it's a band, you know, pounding the pavement to get out there more and coming up from nothing, or somebody that has really something very important and unique to say that maybe doesn't have as many arms holding them up as they could or should. And yeah, I mean, that's a small sample size, but
No, that's no, it's very honorable. I think that's a very special position to be in, as you say, as a journalist, especially in the music industry, because it's so personal, right? Artists' stories, journeys are extremely personal, and you kind of get to be that voice and that catalyst between, you know, the fans, you know, and you know, as in the press or the labels or whatever else is on the other side of that, and kind of the intermediary. So I think that's a really special position to be in. But it's cool just to hear your stories about kind of some of your favorite artists, and kind of that was dovetailing into my next thought was just how do you go about deciding who to interview, or how do you go about deciding the kind of artists you want to write up, you know, is
well, I mean, yeah, it definitely makes a good transition, but that is certainly a process unto itself. Like any journalist, whether you're with a big publication or you're, you know, DIYing it, you know, overloaded inboxes are a thing. And I mean, beyond kind of trying to wade through the sheer quantity, let's say there's, you know, a decent handful, but, you know, more than you can handle in one day in terms of stuff that sticks out. You start to kind of like narrow it down in terms of things that, you know, the overwhelming inbox, and then narrowing down to either styles that maybe you were looking like, I haven't covered this style or this artist in a while, or I've done 3 indie records in a row and I should change it up. Like, it's not even something necessarily I'm always conscious of. It might just be like, oh, I've noticed that I've done, you know, 3 in a row of this or what have you. But on a more specific level, I guess it's sort of funny, but like, I think of myself as a storyteller. You know, journalists have their own reasons for why they write, or what kind of vantage point they come from when they are writing, but I like to tell stories. And so if I see an email and I click on it and you have something, you know, kind of what I was saying about Charlie Mountain, something really important to say or something very vibrant, and you kind of explain a little bit of your story to me to the point where when the email is over, I'm like, but wait, I want to know more. That, I mean, that's going to cause me to want to write back and say, I think there's a story here, but you didn't give me enough. Let's talk about it. And then there's an exchange. And then as I learn more, that usually evolves into, hey, this should become a feature. You know, and then, I mean, beyond that, there's obviously, if you put your music, you know, in your emails and the music is right there and I hit play and there's a really strong hook or a really striking lyric, like what with City Mouth, you know, that definitely has a chance of standing out as well. So it depends on how your emails and your pitches are structured, but those are your 2 main ways that kind of will stick out.
It's interesting to hear that insight because we're, on the artist end, you're trying to just get the word out, and it's kind of cool to think in your shoes, like, oh, I have all these, huge inbox. What's going to stand out? And it's kind of a unique position. So in terms of your, let's talk a little bit about. I want to hear more about throw the dice and be nice. It's just kind of maybe you can give a background. I know we're talking a little bit before we got started, just on the story of the name, and maybe how your friends they thought it was going to be like a gambling site.
Yeah, so when what I was saying before about kind of getting into writing to sort of fill a void, when I sat down to make that first blog post, way back when, I think we're going on 10 years now. Um, I picked a template in terms of background, and then the prompt box says put in a title. And I sat and I thought, and I went back and forth, like, do I put music? Do I put something with music? Do I put arts in the name? Like you got to be on the nose with branding. And at the time, this is 2010, everyone's like, you got to be straightforward. But then, like I said, I think we talked about it before. There are blogs out there that have names that don't match music or arts at all. And I thought, you know what? If I'm going to be that different journalist, quote unquote, like, let's go different all the way. And the name kind of came to me after I thought about, well, why do I want to write this? Like, what kind of people am I trying to talk to? And the big thing that I came out of with grad school, and I think that was part of my final paper, was talking about stereotypes with genres and feeling like these barriers about elitism in music versus not. And you have, the elitist, the historically elitist genres like classical and opera, and then the like the less elitist genres like the garage punk and all that. And I was always of the mind that those kinds of people should be able to hang out and talk about their albums, or talk about why it is hard to record an album, or why software is complicated, and why, like, that there shouldn't be a difference. And so in an old version of my site, and I'm pretty sure somebody out there probably find it in like the Wayback Machine, there used to be a tagline that was a couple sentences underneath the title. I've shortened it since then to be, it's time to change the way we view music and the arts. But it used to be kind of like something along the lines of, a guitarist, an artist manager, and a violinist sit down at a bar to talk, and like, and they each get a drink, and what do they talk about, and like, let's throw all the dice out there and see what comes of it. And the whole throw the dice and play nice, the dice thing was the whole throwing it out there. And then as far as play nice, it was kind of like a double play on words of like, play nice meaning some, you're going to find some nice music on here, and also play nice meaning like have your different segments of the industry kind of getting along and learning to communicate and connect and understand each other, and not maybe be so judgmental.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's really unique because I mean, I'm no blog expert, but I don't know of any blogs that are doing that right now that are that's a lot to take on. I mean, that's cool. You're unique. That's your thing. And I went on and I was reading some of your stuff, and I'm just like, wow, like you have apps on there, and like you're recommending things for musicians to use, that like software, and it's not like you just write op-eds. That's like one component of it, but you're covering so many different artists in different capacities, which I think is really cool, and kind of putting them all in conversation with each other, covering different angles. But one of the things I really liked was, what was I wrote it down? Oh, I learned a lot on your site. I went on and now I downloaded Humly because which is a
Oh,
therapy app, and I was like, wow, it's so cool that she's featuring this, because artists like me, like, we're just doing our thing. We're writing music. It's not like we're going out there having time. So it's like, again, being that intermediary, is a help to people down the industry side and the artists too, to keep
yeah,
a
well, I mean, hey, that's cool. I hope it works for you. I like when I pulled up the app, I thought, every once in a while, everyone needs a couple of minutes to just sort of center themselves, and that app really does that. It just presents to you with a bunch of options right in front of you, like easy on the go. Like, it's a way to kind of force yourself to stop, and I think especially now everybody needs that. But yeah, part of it, and I don't want to dovetail too much into if you have any other questions that will go into this, but part of the breadth of topics and sections I cover, sort of evolved organically. Again, like I've been at this for almost 10 years. So had you looked at like an earlier version of my website when I was first coming up, it didn't have as much, very segmented delineation with the content. But as I started writing for other outlets and outlets maybe that had a much more focused grouping of material and the type of products or people or services they covered, that was them. But then when I came back to like, this is my space, I could kind of take what I learned or what I got accustomed to and sort of incorporate that into this sort of catch-all of like, people that maybe found me through one outlet or another one, they'd say, oh, there's a little bit of that other outlet that I recognize her writing style, like is now here. Not in an utterly specific copying, like doing cookie cutter type style, but just being like, okay, I've learned to write about tech. I'm not afraid of writing about tech now, so I should do it more. Like, I don't just have to do it only when I have an assignment from this one place. I can do it in other places. I can make it a bigger facet of like my knowledge, and so I should put it out there more. And so as time has gone on, I've kind of gotten more comfortable writing about more things, and so that's kind of how that came about. And tech definitely was a big thing because one of my first working contractual relationships was with a music tech blog called Sound Control, and I did that for several years and was like, I don't even know how many pieces in total, but I was doing several a day every day. So just the sheer number of apps and equipment and such that you're talking about.
Area, it's a burgeoning area. I mean, I've had a prediction this is going to happen. I mean, all this like it's going to go beyond metronome apps. I had a feeling it's going through music school. There's got to be a better way to like compose music than using like Finale or something else. There's got to be a quicker way to like do all these things or to send sheet music. And that's
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, just for one, and actually, I think it's on my .com. I don't think it was one I did with Sound Control, but there was one. I think it was with like a Windows staff pad. You could like, they give you a stylus and you could like so it was kind of your best of your both worlds where you're not going through 100 sheets of paper, but you could, do your scribbling shorthand of however you wrote your manuscript. And I was like, oh, all of my music teacher friends are going to love this. So, yeah, it's definitely beyond metronome apps. You've got everything from pocket mixers to, I think I have an article up there about like a mini amp that like looks like the top of an amp stack that you can plug into the bottom of your guitar and just take it on the go. So yeah, I mean, tech is definitely coming hard and fast the last couple of years.
It is. So I guess I want to jump back to just the genre. I think that's what we both in common. I just want to deep dive into that a little more.
Sure.
More on where, since you are able to interview a lot of artists and you're constantly ingesting new music and you're on the scene, kind of what are you seeing on the horizons in terms of genre defined boundaries, if that makes sense? Are a lot of trying to become that way, like where they don't want to identify with one particular genre, they're trying to draw on maybe many influences?
Well, I mean, I think that's a thing that's been happening for a few years now, and it's definitely, I think, accelerated somewhat. I believe, depending on who you talk to, the enthusiasm for it can vary, because if it's just a matter of saying, oh, I want to have more electronic components in my in my folk music, or I want to use apps to help mix my traditional jazz quartet, that's one thing. And then there's, but then there's also the segment of the population that maybe is looking to kind of blur the boundaries in terms of, oh, I really like this regional style of music that comes from, XYZ place. And that kind of then ventures into a whole separate conversation about, authenticity, traditionalism, representation. And so there's some complexities that go into it, but in terms of just the pure sonic angle, I do think that genres are definitely becoming less of a cemented identifier for artists because, I mean,
Yeah.
instruments, you could have a flutist in an orchestra, you'd have a flutist in a jazz band, you'd have a flutist in your folk punk trio, and that's totally a thing I've seen. So instruments aren't necessarily the hallmarks of style and genre that they used to be, and so I think that frees people up to feel like they can try and use different sounds and different instruments in whatever way, you know, comes to mind, without worrying about the label that might come with it.
Yeah. It almost seems like we have to, in recent years, change the way we evaluate or assess or somehow identify with artists. Like it's more about their story now. It's less about oh, what is your music? Oh, you're a rock band or you're a jazz band. It's more like, oh, well, what movement are you behind, maybe? Or can you maybe talk to me a little bit about that? I've always had this thought like artists are kind of activists and that we're always like creating kind of a story or weaving a movement around our music. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for sure. You know, in all of the writing that I've done for, you know, folk music and roots music, that's been their thing for a long time. But it's interesting the way that you phrase that. I do think that's pretty on the nose. You know, because if you're not looking at the bones and the instruments of an artist or a band, you know, like what is the next thing? It is, you know, the personality or the heart or the story. And I think, or the reasoning, you know, it could be like, well, why is there that sort of out of left field instrument in your band? And there could be a whole story behind just that. But yeah, a lot of it is story driven, you know, like the questions of that people see certain things about the way that your band looks or sounds or dresses or the type, you know, style of videos you shoot. And people will have these curiosities. And, you know, for every interview question, a question can kind of be a little mini story unto itself. So that I do think that that is becoming more of the forefront focus in people's minds, is wanting to know what artists are about. In terms of causes, I think that there are some that definitely feel more comfortable being that very loud, very prominent voice. You know, critics be darned. Um, but it's still I think a little bit of a gray area because there is, I think some people, it depends on what kind of artist you want to be. If you're the kind that is very business oriented and you want to make your music and you want it to reach a bunch of people and you're trying to make this into your livelihood and you kind of got your blinders on, maybe you're the kind that you acknowledge in your personal life, that there are things going on in the world and you deal with that, you know, off stage as you the human being, but then when you're on stage as you the musician, maybe for some that's not their focus, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have causes that are important to them. I think it's a matter of priority. So I think there are definitely trends of artists caring more and having that care be more vocalized, but I don't necessarily hold it against artists that are still sort of kind of keeping in a lane that they've been in, because everyone has their different reasons for why they make a song, you know, like why they put out an album. You know, it's easy as an onlooker or a consumer to see 10 albums and go, well, there's 10 tracks on 10 albums and it's all the same amount of work and it's all the same, but it's not. People have a myriad of reasons why they do things, and there's a myriad of stories as to how you got from no album to album.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's trying not to judge.
Yeah. And that must be, you know, it is a challenge, I imagine, because everything is so personal again to be able to, you know, interpret something and be a writer about something so, you know, special and dear to people. But from reading your reviews, I've been blown away, just the list of wonderful things that artists have said about how you capture them and how, you know, how you really get inside the music and get to the heart of their song, or, you know, spin it in a way that makes them shine. So I guess,
Well,
how have you developed that knack? Is it just a part of
um,
your experience, or something you've had to kind of practice in a niche style with this music journalism in particular?
well, I mean, first of all, thank you for saying that. It does mean a lot. I hardly consider myself somebody that like knows everything. I'm still learning all the time. There are journalists that have, you know, paved the way far before me that I still kind of am looking up and going, I hope I'm like that one day. But in terms of my own style, I mean, I guess some of was honed, not conscientiously, like I'm not in there digging in the trenches, but um, if I were to attribute it to anything, it might just be the fact that I wore a lot of hats coming up. Like, as I said, I've been into music since I was a child. But when I like really started to dig into it in school, through high school, college, etc., um, I wanted to know everything. You know, when I was in college, I started out as somebody pursuing the teaching track, and you know, life circumstances and some reevaluation and some soul searching, you know, I changed my major midway through college, and I was pursuing, you know, the degree is music industry, but I, you know, for people out there, it's, you know, like a music business thing, but it was really more, rather than being like mostly business with music sprinkled on top, it was like learning all the segments, you know, the A&R, the recording, the songwriting, development, like all those other facets of the commercial industry. And when I sort of was exposed to all that, it made me care about the fact that like everybody that works in those different segments, like it's hard. Um, like my senior project in college was I had to write and mix and master and then like sort of promote on campus like my own record, and I had to do it in a couple of months, and it was really hard. And so it forced you to have to wear all the hats. And so, you know, I did that. And then when I, you know, did the arts administration thing, that was another hat. And it made me appreciate other facets of making artists do what they do, but, you know, with a slew of different genres, because you're talking about the New York Phil and the Metropolitan Opera and the, you know, the New York Ballet. So I think when I listen to, you know, somebody sends me an MP3 of a single, and you think, well, it's just one song. How much can you possibly take out of it? I'm thinking about the artist. I'm thinking about the family they're writing about because it's a song about their childhood. And I'm thinking about, well, you know, I'll ask them, I write them back and I go, well, who mixed this? Who mastered it? And then if they tell me, I'll look up the engineers and I'll look up their experience and the style that they mix and master in. And I'll, you know, ask, you know, where did you record this? How did you place your mics? And I guess to some extent, I've been fortunate that I kind of was exposed to those things, and so it brings my attention to it. But I mean, the information is out there, so I think it's not common to address so many little facets. So I guess if I were to claim any sort of uniqueness, that would probably be it. But to me, again, it's just trying to acknowledge that there are a lot of spokes in the wheel of making an album and making an artist and making an artist's career and making an artist's career that sustains for years. So I try to sort of acknowledge that just because you can hit play on Spotify or Apple Music, there was a lot of people that came before that hitting the play button, that could make the song either, you know, the reason that you love it or the reason maybe that you don't love it. And I just try and shed light on those things.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot there, and that behind the scenes, I think, is what makes you great at being a music journalist, and what makes people like you really shine and stand apart from the crowd. Because just generic album reviews about how it sounds or something subjective is a lot different, right, than diving into the mic placement and who mixed it, and tell me a little bit about the story, which I do think, and hopefully we're evolving here as humans and wanting to learn more about that is, you know, getting beyond, it just sounds good, to, what's the story of this person, or what techniques have they used in the studio, things like that. I think there's always been that behind the scenes fascination when you say with like videos and things, but definitely goes it's true in writing, I'd imagine, as well. You know.
Yeah, you know, I, you know, again, just to sort of bolster on the point I was making, I think it helps to have experience. And so, like I said, when I did that project and where I was kind of forced to wear all those hats, it kind of also informs the wording of how I form my questions for artists. Instead of just saying, well, how did you feel recording the lead single of your album? It's like, I picture, okay, if that's me, what am I doing? And I'm like, okay, you have to book the studio time, you have to warm up your voice, you have to pick the mic, you have to go up there, and it's like, okay, I have to not overstrain my S's and my R's. And like, are you thinking about that? And then I look at the lyrics and I go, well, there's a lot of S words in that line. And so like, was that a thing they thought about? And, you know, maybe they are a fast talker, and just a lot of these little things. And sometimes I think, oh, it's so nuanced, like no one's going to get it. But I think that is where it's my job then to take what is a very, very niche detail and then make it approachable for, you know, your average listener. So I might talk about, like, I've mentioned in reviews here and there over the years. I think I was talking about the S thing because that was a prominent example. I mentioned like a de-esser plugin on on a song, and I said, oh, maybe like I wonder if they used it or not because that's a lot of S's. And I'm thinking, okay, nobody knows what a de-esser plugin is. You got to like explain it, and you got to, you know, fill in the blanks. But I don't think it hurts to put new information out there. You know, like I don't think I don't think it's common for your regular review to mention a de-esser plugin, but somebody who maybe is making songs in their bedroom, right? And is perusing album reviews, and they are like, oh, I'm thinking about, like, I want my music to be better and I don't know how. And they go, oh, I've got a little bit of a lisp and I don't know how to fix that. And like, isn't there a thing that can do that? And then they go, wait, there's a software that fixes that? You know, you never know. So sometimes I just throw stuff out there into the universe, and
You
maybe somebody there will
just
see it. Throw those dice.
and someone could check out what's hot in music and also the S app or the S software to fix
Yeah, you know. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I just try and cast a wide net, you know, with talking about what makes a song tick, and even just who I talk to, you know. I think I remember you saying something about me noticing, you know, people from around the world, and that's something I love about the internet, and especially now because everyone's doing all these live streams and instantaneous connection. Is like, there's no reason that you can't listen to an artist from like thousands of miles away. And you know, not to toot Bandcamp's horn too much, but that's another reason why I love that site. Is it is no boundaries in terms of like language and location and genre, and it's all just out there. So you got your, you know, alt rock band out of Detroit, like right next to some, you know, post rock from Moscow, like
Right.
full on all in Russian, you know, no English, and it's just right there. And I mean, it could have a good groove. So
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely that. And we were talking about that before we got started. That evening of the playing field, where artists, you know, are constrained to just doing live stream. But then, like starting out artists like myself are like, oh my gosh, I have a chance now to talk to all these cool artists because they don't really have an excuse not to talk to us because they're not off touring the globe. Like they, you know, maybe they can have a humble moment and talk, give some advice to, you know, upcoming artists, or, you know, connect with people like you know, probably busy writing, and maybe I don't know, is there a little lull right now, or are things still pretty?
oh my gosh, it's funny. I mean, me personally, individually, I'm busier than I was for sure.
Say that. I kind of feel that way too.
I'm busier than I was, and I'm not really sure like what caused it. It was just like one day I was like noticing it was kind of like a slow uptick, like you're going up a roller coaster and suddenly it's just all coming down. But it's a good thing, you know. People, if they're making music or writing a song and they're working on something and they're feeling good, that's a good thing, you know. As I'm sure you probably have friends and family, or we all know somebody. These are hard times, and they can. I mean, I've had really great days, and I've had some pretty bummer days. So if people are making music and and you know, emailing me, it means they're making music and not, you know, feeling down. So I take that as a good thing.
We really need them more than ever. Some, you know, artists sharing their light and creativity right now. In a way, I know personally, just speaking from experience, it's hard. It's very hard to pull that pull that strength to keep that creativity going when you just want to like hang it up for the time being because it's just hard, with everything going on. It's just very heavy feeling we all must be feeling to a certain extent, a very angsty feeling too. So
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Myriad of emotions.
yes, the whole gamut. So I don't know, my prediction, I like to just predict, is that we're gonna have this big resurgence and boom of all this creativity and emotion. It'll be all these like songs and like new music, everything will be released and kind of like this reaction to COVID in a way.
Oh, well, one of my things is I'm wondering like how like explosive and I mean lyrically or maybe even dynamically, like how big is the first like song of the summer whenever like whether it's next summer or the summer after like the first real post-COVID summer where we're out and like things are good. Like you think people are just gonna do like the old-fashioned, wall of sound like the just the amp stack in the studio, just crank it to 11 and be like, we're free! Everything's good now. Let's be super loud.
Right, right.
You know?
Playing it from huge stereos, like just woo, get it up to blasting, their ears out. Yeah, it might happen. It might happen. I wonder what we'll be playing. I don't know if it will have a genre. I really don't know, but
I don't know. I
uh,
don't know. It's
oh,
fun to think about, though.
I feel like when you say like pop is becoming a little more sophisticated in that I think artists just because we're always like jazz pop or rock pop, it's always being kind of blended into other things.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we'll, raise up the genre a little bit to a more sophisticated level beyond all the jingles that are out there with like ooh ooh ooh, whatever.
Well, I mean, in a way, I mean, if we're talking predictions, I don't think that some of the, easy to grab onto and very catchy kind of the syllabic drivers of choruses, I don't think that's going to go away. It might even have an uptick, if only because, like you said, we're in some stressful times. And so maybe it's just easier in the moment where you're like, I just need a beat. I need something to fill the room and fill my ears. And syllabic choral drivers are really easy to just kind of push you along when you need a push
So,
without you feeling like you gotta remember a line or listen really deep to something. Um, so,
syllabic driver for everyone those listening, me included. I'm not sure I know what that means. I
oh,
haven't.
I just mean, like when you have those choruses that are full of your oohs and your ahs and your haze.
Yeah,
I mean, some people call it filler. I try to say syllabic driver because it sounds a little more forgiving.
I like the way it sounds.
But yeah, like I, I don't think that stuff will necessarily go away, but I mean maybe it'll be backed by some really unorthodox, non-westernized instruments,
Yeah.
who knows?
knows? You can get lost in that predicting the future, but at least I like I would take solace in knowing that hopefully there's more of a world influence happening on a larger level musically, as we're all in the age of globalization and
Mm-hmm.
technology and that connectivity that's constant. I know something I'm trying to do in my music is just bring in a more world flavor. Someone told me for the first time, you have like a world sound too. I'm like, what? I never thought of that. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll take it. But then I started thinking, yeah, there are other instruments. I've been listening to a lot of steel pan music all of a sudden. I don't know.
Ah, well, that's cool. Well, I mean, it's funny because we're talking about, non-Western instruments and unexpected sounds. I mean, I think what was it, the Google Doodle for today was this whole thing about the kalimba, and I was like, I love the sound of the kalimba, but I think that it could be. It kind of goes a little bit back to what I was saying before about the different segments between like how much you celebrate the blurring of genre lines versus not. I think when somebody says, it's worldly, there's, and I'm coming at this because I'm a writer, so, like words are my thing. I think there's a little bit of a discourse to be had about the way we describe, okay, so this is Western music, and then you have your Eastern music, and then you have musicians in Eastern countries, maybe that are playing a style that's historically, from the southern United States or from the Appalachian region. And so there's this sort of wanting a little bit, actually, while you want the sounds of music to sort of maybe be able to blend more, I think when it comes to the places, you actually want a little bit more delineation in certain contexts where you're not just saying world, because there's this idea that like the world is one place, but also having a place versus the world. It's like, this is not the Scott Pilgrim movie. But I think recognizing that just because a genre of music is, customarily coming from a certain region, like historically, you'd be surprised, where there are other kind of niche groups of pockets of bands that will pop up in certain other regions of the world, and you go, well, is that typical? And it's like, well, what's even typical for a region of the world now? People think of, like, for example, like bluegrass. People think a certain area of the US, but there is a big bluegrass following and crowd in the UK and Scotland and parts of London. I see a lot of releases coming from artists over there, and they pick a banjo just as well as anybody that has been living their whole life in the birthplace of bluegrass. So, who's to say, what place makes something worldly or not? And so I think we're all, like there's a balance between where it helps to have specificity and where it doesn't.
Yeah,
and I think that's another thing journalists are trying to sort of navigate and sort of help steer for readers and listeners.
definitely. Yeah, you're kind of forefront of that. You could say world, or you can say they use a calypso or a conga in this context, or just slap a label on it. So yeah, I think you really are in the driver's seat, which got to be a cool place to be.
It can be a lot of pressure. You try to make everybody happy as much as you can.
Right.
Certainly, it's not something I take lightly. Words are a powerful thing.
They are.
I think, like whether you're writing about music or fashion or food, if you have an audience, it's important that you don't just, you put things out there, but then you listen to your audience and you try to be attentive and you try to always learn. It's a two-way street.
Right.
So yeah, anyway, thank you for entertaining my super nuanced nerd bit there. But
I knew we were going there. It was all good. I often just like to think about the future and the future of musical genres and kind of how we identify our music. It's a fascinating rabbit hole. I'd love to visit. So thanks.
you're welcome.
So what's next? What's on the horizon for you? What are you looking forward to working on, or in terms of your writing, where are you? What are you working on right now?
Well, I mean, I have a couple of pieces that I've been, working on, chipping away at. They're pretty involved, that are going to be hitting the web, in the next couple of weeks. And there were some artists that like I've had some really, really engaging conversations, and kind of like what you were saying, getting really down into the trenches. And I'm really excited. And they're tied to, forthcoming releases. But beyond just talking about like, oh, what's new about the record, just getting really into, again, that storytelling element of like what drove the sound style of this song. Like there's a stylistic deviation since the last record, like what pivoted, what caused that change, and just like a bunch of stuff. So in the next few weeks, I have things that are going to be going live, and I am a frequent and attentive sharer of all of my material. So, and I don't tend to like to tip my hat a lot because, like you said, I mean, I cover a lot of styles. So I just like to put stuff out there, and it kind of keeps people guessing a little, but I think that makes it fun.
Yeah, definitely. I could do any videos, video interviews, maybe live streams.
I mean, artists have definitely been more available. I do actually have a video call scheduled next week with a band. It kind of came up suddenly. It was just sort of um, a well-timed serendipitous thing of a publicist reaching out and saying, hey, did you, see the press materials I sent about this album? And I said, oh no, like, what, when is it coming out? And there's kind of this limited time frame. And so you kind of get this crunch of being like, all right, we got to get it planned. We got to get the call done. And it can be a little bit daunting sometimes, but there's also, I mean, just speaking for myself, there's a little bit of that adrenaline rush of like, okay, I got to get it done. But also like still got to put in 110% with the writing. So I'm going to be doing that, and that's going to be, phone call, transcription, writing, getting it out there, and that's kind of on the express track. So I've got a couple of pretty beefy pieces coming with some they're all very different artists. So three or four or some odd, very different pieces with different styles of music and different stories and different vantage points. So if you are looking for a variety.
Yeah. So this will be on your Throw the Dice and Play Nice site, right?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I update that weekly. And I, like I said, I try to keep people guessing, but some of those things are going to be with American Songwriter.
Right.
And they're another platform, I write for them, and what I think makes my relationship with them so special is that they are very open and cast a unbelievably wide net on all different kinds of styles of music and all different artists with, a breadth of stories, just like me. So, I kind of feel a little bit of a kindred spirit, supporting them and being a part of that team too. So
Definitely. Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. I like the direction that's heading. I think there just needs to be more writers like you, or journalists that are willing to, not be so specialized and be willing to just write what, about artists that speak to them or have really great stories and really compelling movements around them instead of focusing on, as we're saying, the genre or the kind of traditional path. Class.
oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. I'm just trying to be me. It's not a shtick, and I'm not trying to really like one up anybody. I'm just doing what feels, not to sound cliche, but doing what feels good from the heart.
Can't ask for more than that. That it's obviously working.
Oh, thank you.
You started this blog and you didn't barely know what to title it, and now how successful it is, and getting all these pitches. So I'm happy for you, and I'm really glad Mackenzie is in touch. This has been great.
I'm glad to have another person now that I know, and I was just really thrilled to be a part of this, and it's always nice to like kind of cross audiences with new artists and new marketers or tech makers or whoever it is, and so I'm just glad to kind of have our circles kind of overlap a little.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Well, I'll let you get on with your night, but I want to just thank you for being on Hannah's Corner, and I'll let you get back to your writing. But I will. Everyone be on the lookout for Kira's work. As she said, she has some beefy 3 to 4 pieces coming out, and she's not going to tell you about it, but it's going to be amazing. Little surprise. So
yeah, well, you know how it is. You wanna wait till everything is live and alive. So, but like I said, I'm a frequent sharer. So I mean, if you're out there and you feel so inclined, I am, on various social media platforms, and everything I put is out there. And if you have comments, and if they're good, they're disagreeing, they're questioning, I mean, I welcome all feedback. I think that's an important facet of journalism, is a two-way discourse, and it doesn't have to be neat and sparkly all the time. I think a little bit of messy conversation, as long as it's respectful, is necessary to help us all grow as people. And like that's kind of like a secondary thing that is important to me with being a journalist and being out there. So if you feel inclined to read my stuff and it makes you feel things, please like share, comment, like email me. It's I welcome it.
Oh, awesome. Wonderful. Well, this has been great getting a chance to talk to you, and I'm really excited to read your pieces. I'll be on the lookout, and be sure to throw them up on my page and share them with my
Well, thank you so much. You got a big new fan for Hannah's Corner, and I will be tuning in for the next awesome guest that you have. And yeah, you know,
Well, let's stay in touch and hope you
absolutely.
well through the staying home and through COVID. You continue to.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you all the best and continued health and wellness and hopefully more good days than rough days. And well, we'll all get through this.
We will. We definitely will. We definitely will.
All right. Well, you have a good night.
You too, Kara. Take care. Bye bye.